I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons first. Thank you so much to my Bibliospren, Bibliohowlers, and my Bibliomancers. It means a lot to me that you give me your extra support for my passion and hobby. Hi everyone. In today's conversation with authors, I am really glad to finally got the chance to speak with James Islington. James Islington is the author behind the Licanius Trilogy and the upcoming The Will of the Many here. And I got lucky with a recent an advance reading copy of The Will of the Many. And yeah, welcome to my channel, James. James, it's really an honor to have you here. And just introduce yourself first.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Petrik. It's yeah, I'm James Islington. So I've been I'm the author of the Licanius Trilogy, and I have been writing for 12 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's very easy for me to calculate because I basically started writing on my 30th birthday. Um,
Oh.
yeah, it was very much a I had the opportunity at the time to go part-time with the work that I was doing. And I was approaching my 30th birthday and I'd always wanted to be a writer. Um, but you obviously have to take the sensible option with actually earning enough to feed yourself. And I was approaching 30 and I kind of went, right, this is kind of it. This is either give it a go now, when you've got this opportunity, or wait till you're 65 and retired and and live till then. So I sat down literally on my 30th birthday and started writing Shadow of What Was Lost. So
Oh, wow. So that
uh,
was really your first book.
yeah, absolutely. And it's not like I said, I wanted to be a writer since I was a kid.
Oh.
And it's not that I hadn't given sort of minor attempts here and there to things.
Mm-hmm.
But it was always, and it wasn't half-hearted, but it always ended pretty abruptly in me going, this isn't working and this is too much
Oh.
effort. Because it's hard writing your first book,
Yeah.
figuring out what works for you as a writer. It's just a process of you really have to stick with it. And it wasn't till I really gave myself that opportunity by being part-time and going, no, I'm going to treat this basically like a job. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and a job that I love, obviously, and it was no guarantee of making me any money, but until I really got disciplined with it and kind of went, no, I'm gonna push through all the difficult stuff. I'm gonna go write a terrible first draft
Mm-hmm.
and then slowly get better. It wasn't until I did that anything happens. So yeah.
And I have to say the result is absolutely impressive now.
Thanks.
And here you are. You now have a new book. I think
Yeah.
the Light of All That Falls. I think came out in 2019, right?
Yeah. 3.5 years ago now.
Wow. How do you feel? This is I think this is your second series. This is the first time you're trying a new
Yeah.
series after the Licanius trilogy. How do you feel about
Yep.
all of this?
Oh, I'm very excited. I actually finished this book. So, yeah, 3.5 years since Light published.
Hmm.
But I finished this book basically mid 2021.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
and there was this just through circumstances, that obviously there was the effects of COVID going on with publishing, and
Yeah.
then my editor had some. He was sick for a bit, and there was just all this stuff that happened. But basically, I submitted this July 2021, and we started
Okay.
editing it in May 2022.
Almost a year.
uh, Almost a year, and it was an interesting time because I wanted to keep on going with book two, and
Hmm.
I did for a large part, but in the back of your mind, you're going, oh, I'm writing book two, and how much of book one am I going to have to change? Is all of this? Am I going to have to scrap all of this work that I'm doing? And it worked out fine. It was we didn't really have to change much at all.
Hmm.
We cut a bit. I think the draft that I submitted was 255-ish thousand words, and we got it down to 240.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was we managed to cut quite a bit, and they were good cuts.
Uh,
I'm always I'm always a bit nervous. I remember when I got the initial edits back, and then again, this is after a year of me
uh.
kind of going, I'm waiting on these edits. I want to know. And I got the initial edit letter back, and Joe, my editor, who's been fantastic, I've really liked working with him. But one of the first things he was like, "Yeah, I want to cut X amount of pages off this," and I was just going, "Oh no!" This is the first time I worked with Joe as well, so I wasn't sure. Like obviously he's a professional, but you never know how well you're going to click with an editor.
Yeah, true, true.
Um, and but he after the initial shock of going, oh, okay, I've got to cut a whole bunch. I looked at the bits that he was like, oh, I think you can cut here and here and here, and I kind of went, yeah, okay. Not that you ever want to,
Uh-huh.
but it made the book tighter, and it didn't lose anything, and at the end of the
Mm.
day, that's kind of all you want from cuts. You want it to be the tightest book possible without losing any of what makes the book good. Um so yeah, that was great. Once we did get to editing, that was actually a pretty good experience. um and Yeah, and then obviously from there it's all been pretty smooth sailing. It's a
Uh,
pretty standard timeline. Um I think to my mind, it's usually from editing to publishing. That seems about right. We finished that in maybe August-ish.
okay.
But then you go through copy edits, and it's just that usual, the last 1% of polishing that takes several months extra. Um, but yeah, no, I'm really excited. I'm really excited for it to come out. I've had it written for ages and been very keen for people to read it, and just aside from my wife,
Yeah.
who read it, who is now been waiting for 2 years for the sequel already. Um,
Oh my God, poor her.
yeah. um, yeah, it's yeah, I'm very excited for people to read it. So I'm very much looking forward to next Tuesday, I think it is. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's almost out now. Finally.
yeah.
I absolutely love the book, as you can tell already. And I also love your Licanius Trilogy. Do you feel like there is an extra pressure now? Because I know there are many fans who love the Licanius Trilogy, especially The Light of All That Falls. I think you really nailed that concluding volume.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's in some ways, yes, definitely there's definitely pressure.
Hmm.
I think moving on to a new series, and being the first in a series, I feel like you always really got to try and nail it, because this is um I mean, you try and nail every book, obviously.
Yeah.
you know um but yeah, it was very well received, and I was really happy with how it
Hmm.
all turned out. But um I think at the same time, I'm most confident in this
Hmm.
book. I'm actually quite um this is so I feel like when I was writing Licanius,
Yeah.
I loved writing that series, but I was also in a kind of a constant state of panic. where,
Oh.
where I'm writing it going, because you're doing all this stuff for the first time. Like even on the third book, you're going, oh, I've never finished a series before. I've
Yeah.
never written a conclusion to a story before, essentially. And you're kind of feeling your way, and you're going, am I doing this right? Is this going to work out the way I've envisaged it in my head? And you learn so much from that experience.
Hmm.
Um, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to do something new, because it got to the end of Licanius, and my agent sent me an email going, "Oh, what's next?" And
Yeah.
the publisher was very interested in doing some more Licanius,
Okay, okay.
and, and which I completely understand. And one day, obviously, I mean, I've already said this. One day, I'm going to go back to that world. I will do more in that world. But at that point, I kind of went, "Oh, I've learned all this stuff, and I feel like moving on to a blank slate
Hmm.
is the best way to apply that, like all of that as an author. Because, obviously you can still get better and work in the same world. But, in 2019, I'm writing this story that's working around decisions I made in 2011.
Hmm, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and so, in some ways, as much as that worked out, you can still feel that that's a bit of a shackle on you progressing
Hmm.
and letting yeah, I really just wanted to stretch myself a bit as an author and see what I could do with a blank slate. So moved on to this, and yeah.
Well, I must say though, for your first series, it is one of the most ambitious series that I've ever read. It is so complex, you know my thoughts on them already. Also, because it's quite interesting though, because you have learned plenty of stuff, a lot of stuff from writing the Licanius Trilogy, but you adapted them into The Will of the Many. But The Will of the Many is a completely different kind of fantasy book compared to the
Mm,
Licanius Trilogy. So I'm wondering
yep.
what was the original seeds and ideas that planted in your mind for the will of the many?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, I mean, not um not an inspiration in and of itself, but so
Ah,
much of it, so much of when I was thinking about it to start with was, how do I make this different from Licanius? How do I
hmm.
uh, if you're going to go and do a different series, you want to do a different series. You don't want to do, I didn't want to do Licanius 2.0,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Um, and so a lot of the decisions did kind of come from that. I was, the first person perspective was something that I immediately went, some of my favorite books are written in first person perspective. I
Hmm.
went, this is a great new challenge. The magic system was something that I did kind of come up with in very rough form while I was writing Licanius. It's one of those things that uh, you have ideas while you're writing, and you go, "Oh, this is a great idea. It completely cannot be applied to this world. I'm going to put it. I'm going to put it in the this is a great idea basket and use it later." And so I had this idea for the magic system, and it was kind of, I was very much inspired. Have you read David Farland's Rune Lords
Ah,
series?
I haven't read that one. I own it, but I haven't read that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I read that 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, and uh, the the premise, and again, 20 years ago, so this is
Yeah,
not a knock on the book, but I do not remember much about the plot or the characters,
yeah.
but the magic system was fantastic, and it's this world where it's kind of a feudal system, um, where people can give up aspects of themselves. So like your strength or your beauty or or your intelligence, things like that, to your lord in exchange for protection. So you might lose all of your strength and become basically a husk.
Oh.
And your lord gains that amount of strength, but then he has this obligation to you to look after you, and maybe give food to your family, or whatever. And I loved that system because it had so many interesting aspects. It was using humans as a source of power.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it was, they had to give that up willingly, but they often did because of the social need for it. Um,
Ah.
and and then the way it was tied into society, just so so cleanly and so tightly. It wasn't just, when some magic systems will be, and there's nothing wrong with doing it this way, but some magic
Hmm.
systems are, magic is based on this resource, and society is kind of, envisaged as working around that.
Oh,
How
yeah.
would society change if this resource was that important, sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
But this wasn't that. This was so tightly, yeah, it was just so tightly enmeshed in society,
Mm-hmm.
that it was a beautiful system, and I obviously I really loved it, and so I always wondered what that would look like in a more I can say advanced civilization, I guess, in a
Mm-hmm.
more popular civilization, in a more national sort of sense, rather than just for individuals. And that's kind of where the idea of
The
will
will.
and the hierarchy came from. So I had that idea very roughly in my head,
Okay.
and then after that, again, looking at kind of ways to make the world distinct from Licanius, I started thinking about historical cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And Rome immediately. Immediately, I was like, Rome was very hierarchical for a start, so it was a perfect fit for the magic system. Um,
Mm.
but also, it's just great for epic fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like you look at it. It might be the benefit of hindsight now, but I look at it and go, why aren't there more epic fantasy set in Rome?
Exactly. That's what I said too.
Yeah, yeah, because it's like I mean, there's Codex Alera
Yeah.
by Jim Butcher, which I read many years ago and I enjoyed. And honestly, that's the only epic fantasy that I can think of that has a Roman setting. And it's just historically, it's so interesting. It's got such an epic sweep of it's
Hmm.
got wars and politics and backstabbing and fascinating characters and civilization developing, and it's just great. And yeah, so it seemed like just a really obvious choice. And admittedly, my Roman history was not amazing when I started. I was not a Roman scholar by any stretch of the imagination, but that was also an appeal in some ways, because I knew I'd have to do research, and I wanted to do research to get some inspiration for world building.
Hmm.
And I knew that if I was going to do research, I wanted to do research into something that already interested me, because if I'm not engaged on that side of things, then I'm not going to be engaged in the writing, and that's going to come across. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so yeah, yeah, Rome. That's kind of how the Roman flavor of it came about, I guess. Um, and then what else? Um, it's great actually. Your review and a bunch of other reviews have mentioned Name of the Wind and Red
Uh,
Rising,
yeah. Yeah.
um, which is perfect, because
Oh.
that is I was so happy to see that, because that is legitimately that's what I've been going for, in
Oh.
terms of my inspirations, in terms of tone. Like, I think with because I love both of those series.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So Red Rising, kind of the tone and the pace and the really proactive protagonist.
Yeah,
Um,
Darrow.
yeah, Darrow. So I love that. And then obviously Name of the Wind with the sort of the Magic Academy setting,
Yeah.
and I kind of how personal, Pat Rothfuss's balance of,
Hmm.
it is an epic fantasy, but that book is so personal to both.
Yeah.
And I really love that about that book. And so, I kind of wanted to do, obviously not exactly the same thing, but something similar to that. So yeah. And
Well, well, I never felt like it was the same thing, and I love both King Killer Chronicle and Red Rising. So yeah.
yep, yep. Excellent, excellent. Yeah. And yeah, it's funny actually. I wrote the blurb for this book.
Yeah.
Um, and and this was obviously well after everything was done and dusted. It was all ready to go, and um, I wrote the blurb and went, "Yep, this is great. This is just getting across the voice of the book a little bit, and it's getting across the information that I need." And oh no, it sounds a lot like Red Rising. I kind of went. I had this moment of like, um, you know, and after a couple of minutes, I immediately went, no, 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 it's fine. They're very different books. They are going in very different directions. So obviously, thematically, um, I think it's partly that, aside from the inspirations that I did take from Red Rising, there are some things that ended up kind of being similar. Like obviously the Roman influence
Yeah.
is there in Red Rising as well, and then thematically there are similar things as well. Um, but which is unsurprising because Roman, again, very
Yeah.
hierarchical,
The
so they're
hierarchy.
very logical choices.
Mm.
Um, but but yeah, no, I like I said, I love both those series. And in a lot of ways, this was me searching for kind of that same feeling that I got from reading those.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I think
yeah.
that's a huge part. That's really a huge part why I love the Will of the Many, because I felt like I got what I wanted. I wanted to experience this kind of story again, about in
Yeah.
original fashion, and I got that in the Will of the Many. I mean, without spoilers, the ending alone can already tell this is a different kind of book. Yeah, yeah. That's all I will say
Yeah.
about this. It's a
Yep.
totally different
Yep.
kind of book and series. Yeah. Also, there's one thing that you haven't attempted before, because you write the Licanius Trilogy in multiple third-person perspective, right? And you're
Mm,
writing this
mm.
here with first-person present tense. So which
Yep.
one is more, well, which one is more of your preference now, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. I think I've enjoyed writing first person present tense more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and whether some of that is because I'm feeling so much more comfortable as an author generally,
Oh,
I,
okay,
I, I don't
okay.
I don't know. It could be, but I think with first person, the great thing about it is it's so much more personal, and it's so much you connect so much more with the character. I think as a reader and as a writer, it, it's it really I think you can get more emotion
Hmm.
um, out of the story because you're in that character's head and you're really experiencing, especially again present tense, you're experiencing things as they're experiencing it. And there's definitely it's definitely different.
Yeah.
There's definitely challenges, especially with epic fantasy. I think trying to convey, because with epic fantasy, the great thing about multiple points of view is that it's a lot easier to convey the scope of a story.
Hmm.
You can send your different characters off in to four corners of the earth, and you can have different major things going on, and you as the reader, get this sense of, yeah, this massive things are happening in the world. Well, as soon as you go into first person, it's so zoomed in.
Hmm.
Um, it's just it's not that you can't do it. It's just a different challenge. Um, so there's that, and then there's the other thing I really found was, which was an adjustment, was the pacing,
Hmm.
and keeping the pacing up, because again, with multiple points of view, what you tend to do, as much as possible, is you leave a character's chapters on a, if not a cliffhanger, then something then that's going to make you want to read on until their next chapters, and then so
Yeah.
character one end with a cliffhanger, and then character two end with a cliffhanger, and so you constantly um excited to see what's happening next for that character, and it kind of pulls you through the story.
Yeah.
But you can't do that with with just one person.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's just really it's yeah, it was great actually. About 10 years ago now. I don't know whether I don't know, I probably haven't mentioned this before necessarily, but I got the opportunity through Pat Rothfuss's Well Builders charity.
Oh,
to have him critique Shadow of What Was Lost. This was
oh,
before, yeah, this was before it was published, and this was incredible. So I'd been, I'd written it, I'd gone through some agents and had been rejected time and time again,
yeah.
and as tends to happen. And then I got this opportunity, and he was amazing, and he read the whole thing. He printed it out. He wrote notes. He mailed it to me. And then he spent like 5 hours on video chat just going through his notes with me. Um,
Wow, that's really
and
nice.
it was, yeah, he was so generous with his time. And it made such a huge difference to me at that point, because it can get depressing. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, when you're getting rejection and you do start to doubt, is this any good? And he was very encouraging. He also had a lot to say about how I could make it better, which was great. But one of the things that has stuck with me since that conversation was he was talking about um, pacing
Mm.
in first person, even though it didn't necessarily apply to Licanius at that point. And he was talking about how he, in the Name of the Wind, at one point he was trying to figure out, okay, well, what makes this great pacing?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he essentially plotted out his arcs. So you have your X and your Y axis, and you have a big sort of arc from beginning to end, and that's the arc of your book. And then you
Okay.
have all your minor arcs, kind of in smaller graphs in the middle,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then and then they overlap, and you want them to overlap so that you never finish a minor arc without another one starting, because it's the same deal as that multiple point of view thing, where you want to keep the reader uh, drawn forward with something
Uh,
that hasn't finished yet. So you don't want to have these dead spaces where you finish one arc and then you start another.
oh,
Um,
yeah, makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, yeah, um, it's something that's really stuck with me all this time. And it's something that I used definitely in Will of the Many, just in a mechanical sense of going, okay, how do I plot this out so that it feels pacey,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to keep on reading while it's first person. And so yeah, that's one of the things that I think was really helpful.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really appreciate about The Will of the Many, and like other books with first-person POV, is how you actually manage to make sure the supporting characters, even though they doesn't have any POV chapters, they still feel so alive, especially like Viz friends. So, do you
Yep.
find it easier to do that without any multiple POV chapters now?
Um.
Because it's all through Viz eyes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's right. And yeah, I mean, it's in some ways, yes, because you're like you said, it's all through Viz's eyes, and so he's kind of forming opinions, I
Yeah.
guess, almost for you in some ways. It was also something that um, I did work on
Mm-hmm.
in this book. It's something that again, I think it was your review that mentioned this. It was one of the things that when I started this book, I went back and I looked at the criticisms
Mm-hmm.
of Licanius, and not to not to drag myself down, sort of thing, but just you know it's I think it's part of the process of becoming more professional as an author.
Okay.
You go okay, well, again, I was doing this as a blank slate.
Hmm.
I don't want to make the same mistakes. And
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, and one of the things, and one of the common threads of criticism was that some of the some people felt that some of the characters felt a bit samey, a bit flat, sort of thing. And that
Mm-hmm.
and it's the sort of thing. Obviously, I personally disagree with that
Yeah, yeah.
because because I wrote, you write these books for yourself, and if I, as a reader, those characters would really work for me. Um, but as a professional writer, you then go, well, that doesn't make these people's opinions invalid. Like if it's a common thread,
Hmm.
that's still something I can work on. That's still something I can try and improve. Um, and and so that, it was something that I did think about, and I did try and work on, just to try and make the characters you feel more distinct and feel more real. And look, I was really happy with the results. I think it's that process of going. I'm trying to sand off the rough edges of my
Oh,
writing, if you know what I mean,
yeah, yeah.
and just kind of become a better rounded writer. And hopefully, in the process, kind of, when you write just for yourself, you're going to hit a very specific audience, and obviously Licanius did quite well, and that was great. But hopefully, if you round off those corners, you're then appealing to an even wider audience. Hopefully,
Yeah, yeah. I
so
think it will. I
yeah,
think it will. And for what it's worth, I think I like Davian, Weir, and Asha. I like them all.
yeah.
But I must say, I think you just wrote Caden too good.
Yeah, Caden's my favorite character.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
awesome, man. He's awesome. But I would say this is looking right. He might match Caden. Might be even better at the end of the series. We will see. We will see.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent.
Also, you mentioned earlier that there was a lot of planning done, right? Sorry, toward the story in The Will of the Many. But speaking
Mm.
of planning, you also did a lot of plannings. I assume you did a lot of plannings in the Licanius Trilogy. Was the same level of details in the planning applied to The Will of the Many or the Hierarchy series as well?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's one of those things that when you figure out what works for you,
Uh,
as an author, if something's gone well, then you stick with it. But yeah, no, I very much I'm I don't even know how well I'd be able to write if I didn't know exactly where I was going
yeah, yeah.
with the story these days. I very much do a skeleton
Hmm.
uh, of what I want to write, so I know where I want this series to end,
Oh, okay.
um, and I know major events along the way, and even to some extent major scenes that I
Mm-hmm.
want to have. But um, I'm very conscious of uh, letting myself fill in the gaps kind of organically.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that, yeah, like, when you start out, that's one of the things you really have to figure out, kind of what works for you in terms of the balance between planning and making stuff up as you go along. Um, and so yeah, I think I've done pretty much the same level as planning as I did for Lacanius. Um, Probably the one thing that might be a bit different this time around is that I've tried to give myself a little bit more wiggle room
Mm.
in terms of like with Licanius, I had very clear pictures of where I wanted the books to finish.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Okay.
and uh, I've been very much trying to make sure that rather than going, no, I want this book to finish here. If it turns out that that's going to create a 500,000 word book, I can finish it elsewhere. I can rearrange things, or I'm just trying to be a bit more flexible this time.
Ah, yeah.
from that perspective. I mean, even the one that I'm writing at the moment, the second book, I started out with a basic idea of where I wanted things to finish, and I got about a third of the way through,
Hmm.
and I went, this book at this pace is going to be 460,000 words long.
Wow.
uh, that's a problem basically. um it's fine because uh you move things around, and you bring up some events that don't need to be later, and so
Hmm.
rather than cutting content and making anything feel rushed or
Yeah.
shortened, it's really just about pacing the story to finish at a high point
Yeah.
for, or a culmination point for book two, um yeah, without sacrificing anything. Whereas the way I probably would have done it previously would have been like, I'm just going to cut a bunch of stuff to try and squeeze it all in, sort of thing, which I don't want to do. So yeah.
Yeah, I think this actually makes me super happy because that's what I love about the Licanius Trilogy. That level of planning, that kind of plot lines, it's connected through the entire trilogy. Everything is
Yeah.
just connected, and I love that. And hearing this actually makes me super happy. I've been talking to, I think I
Excellent.
mentioned this to you already. I've been talking to Nick Martel.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
we are just like a fanboys talking about your book.
yeah,
I think this will happen. No, no, this will happen.
yeah.
So
Oh, that's
yeah,
great.
yeah, I think you're doing it right. And also,
Awesome.
you mentioned earlier about like how the King Killer Chronicle and also Red Rising inspired, in a way, inspired you to the Will of the Many. But
Mm.
I've been hearing this kind of questions lately, but not questions, sorry, but statement from other authors. They mentioned something like ever since they became a fantasy author, they cannot enjoy reading fantasy books
Mm.
again. Something like that. Do you feel the same about that? I mean, you did give a lot of blurbs to a lot of new books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's been it's interesting because I totally get that.
Oh,
So
okay.
when I started writing,
Oh,
and for many years, so probably 2000, 2011 through probably getting on towards 2019.
uh, uh,
I did not read a lot. I got sent some arcs,
uh,
and I did read those. I made time to read those, and some of them, obviously, I blurbed. I really enjoyed, but it's only been in the last little bit. And again, whether it's uh, that extra level of comfort now as an author,
mm.
that's kind of changed my mind. But I am finding that I am getting back into reading more, and I'm enjoying it
Oh, okay.
much more than I was in the past. And I think because what was happening, and I'm sure this is what happens with other authors as well, is that you've got your own story, and you're editing your own story in your head, and you're reading something else, and you're going, I do things this way, or this should
Hmm.
be like this, and it's too much like work basically.
Yeah.
And and um and there is an element as well of writing kind of scratches the same itch as reading, I think, at
Okay.
least for me, in terms of not quite, but in terms of enjoyment. I obviously really enjoy writing,
Hmm.
and you write from 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening, and then have your dinner, and then do you want to keep on reading after that, or do you want to go and sit and watch some TV or something? And
Yeah.
I do get that, but no, I've really just the last few years, really started to come back around to reading, which has been great. I've really surprised how much I missed it in a lot of ways.
That's good. That's good.
And yeah, and I mean, I don't think I've read anything that's like I would say that Red Rising is the last thing that's really like gripped me. Like
Hmm.
I'm up at 3 a.m. and I need to get up at 7 a.m. and I'm like, no, I don't care. I'm going to finish this. Which is that's a feeling that I love, but I haven't had anything like that. But I've had books that I've really enjoyed. Like what have I read recently? I read The Lost War
Oh yeah,
by by
Justin Anderson.
Justin Lee. Yeah, yeah. That was I enjoyed that. I think that comes out
Today.
maybe today. Yeah, I
Yeah, I
think
think
it's
it's today. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But obviously, another self-published guy. Originally, then being picked up by Orbit. And then just recently, for a bit of a change of pace, I read Jade City.
Oh, I love that one
Um,
so much, man.
yeah, it's great. It's great,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah,
I honestly I wasn't sure because my thing's not. I don't tend to go for. I tend to be very epic fantasy
yeah,
focused.
yeah,
In my tastes, and obviously that's leaning. It's not. Yeah, I mean it's leaning more towards almost urban fantasy.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but no, I really enjoyed it. I will 100% be picking up the sequel sometime soon. So yeah, it's great, and it's just there's a great variety of books out there, and it's another avenue for even on a professional level for you expose yourself to new ideas.
Mm,
um
yeah,
and you, the more you do that, the I think the better writer you are. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's true. And also, you mentioned earlier about self-publishing, right? And I
Mm.
think you originally self-published Shadow of What Was Lost, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do you ever think of going back to self-publishing? Or do you feel like traditional publishing is where you at? I mean, of course, there's no wrong or right answer to this one.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, look, um it's not something I would never do, that's for sure.
Hmm.
It's I mean it's come so far. Like I've self-published in 2014, and I think we had at the time it was still quite nascent in terms of um certainly in terms of people's opinions of it.
Yeah.
It was a little bit sniffy in terms of
Yeah.
people looking down on it. But we did have there was some success stories, like you had Hugh Howey, Anthony Ryan's Blood Song.
Oh yeah.
I think Michael J. Sullivan was self-published
Oh
as
yeah, yeah.
well.
True, true.
Yeah. So it wasn't that there weren't success stories, and it was very much becoming more legitimate. And yeah, it's funny because I think um because Shadow did very, very well,
Hmm.
kind of not through any, like I didn't do any marketing or anything like that. It just started selling well, and it was incredible. And it kind of went from this situation where I put it out there. Uh, it wasn't. I took it seriously, like I made sure it's properly edited. We got it, a nice cover for it and all that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
it, I had gone to agents. I had tried to get it traditionally published. This was kind of a last ditch thing where I was like, I just want people to read it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I don't mind what the result is, kind of thing. Um, and then yeah, it started selling, and it kind of it blew my mind a bit. And then it became I could do this. This is enough for me to. This is a job. Like this is an
Hmm.
actual income. Um, and so yeah, self-published end of 2014, started 2015. I got my audiobook deal with Podium.
Oh, okay.
They approached me with that, and then my agent came to me, my now agent,
Hmm.
and said, are you interested in going traditional publishing?
Ah,
Um, and it it's funny because it was at the time, it was a coin toss.
hmm.
Um, because you you look at it on one hand, there's it's something of a dream, obviously, to have your books in bookstores and all
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. But then, you know, you look at the numbers going into your bank account from from what you're doing currently, and you're going, "Am I going to risk that?"
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it was genuinely like this feeling out process of, is this the right decision for me? Um, but in retrospect, I'm so glad that I did it.
Hmm.
I as much as self-publishing has gone from strength to strength, I think, and there's so many just amazing like books out there now. Um, the traditional system has, I've found, really, really useful. Um,
Hmm.
just having like professional editors, and all the editors that I've worked with, I've gotten along with really well, in terms of, we've been on the same page with what we want to do with the story, but having that experienced set of eyes on your story, and seeing the ways you can improve it, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Especially I think, especially with with Echo, I
Oh,
found
Echo, Echo.
yeah, we made some serious. It wasn't so much cuts, but we rearranged a lot of information, because Echo is very heavy on information.
Yeah.
Um, and we did a lot of work with that. And if I had self-published that, um, it would have been enough of a different book that I don't know how successfully it would have gone down. And but I learned a lot from that process. And then, and
Yeah.
then again with Light, and then with Joe, with Will of the Many, I've had great experiences with that. But um, that learning experience has been a real part of, I think, what's helped me improve.
Hmm.
Uh, and then, of course, just the reach of being in bookstores is a big deal.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
yeah, and um, yeah, but you asked the question, would I go back to self-publishing? That actually nearly happened with this book.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, so because like I said, 2015, I got my audiobook deal for
Oh,
Licanius.
yeah.
And I got that separately, and then I did the Orbit deal, which was
Oh.
print and ebook. And so my rights were, it's called bifurcated. Um, and which meant that when it came time to shop around, my next work, we were able to shop those rights separately. Um, and in 2015, it wasn't such a big deal that my audio rights were separate.
Hmm.
These days, audio rights are very, very valuable. And there's basically, from my understanding, there's basically a mandate from the top of the companies, sort of
Uh,
thing, that you don't do deals that don't include audio rights.
oh,
Uh,
okay, okay.
but we got a great offer, like a would be crazy to refuse it offer from Audible,
Hmm.
for just the audio rights. And so it was this situation where we were looking at it going, well, at the end of the day, it's going to be more financially responsible to take the Audible deal and self-publish, if that's what it comes to,
Oh, okay.
um, rather than just go with a traditional publisher with all three.
Yeah, okay.
Uh, but in the end, Saga, came to the party with with the print rights, and I'm genuinely, I'm so glad, because I've got nothing bad to say about Saga. They've been great to work with, and I'm so pleased that this series is with them. And again,
Hmm.
you just having because having an editor, and an editor like Joe, who's been so good, it just makes such a big difference. So
Yeah.
so yeah, again, I'm very, very happy. Where I am in the traditional system, I've
Hmm.
got I've, my agent Paul's been brilliant the whole way through in terms of his advice and stuff. And I'm at this point where I'm surrounded by really great people.
Hmm.
So that's the situation where you go, well, I don't want to change that.
Yeah, yeah, understand.
um, yeah, but you know, down the track, it's not like if it became if it was a better option for whatever reason, I would be very happy to take it.
Yeah,
There's so many advantages to self-publishing. You get so much more control, like granular
yeah,
control of
yeah,
everything. And like there's really nice options for physical printing now as well.
yeah.
I know, like obviously, Broken Binding do some amazing print editions of things, and
Yours too, here.
yeah, absolutely. That was yeah, they were amazing. I was very happy with those.
Yeah, I understand. But whatever you decide, I will read your books. What was your favorite part about writing The Will of the Many anyway, especially compared to the Licanius?
Mm, um, it's a good question. I think probably having it in first person perspective.
Mm,
It made me enjoy. I think I got into writing it more deeply, I guess. So, again, it's that connection to the character. You're almost inevitably putting more of yourself into the character, um, and um, and more emotion into the story, and I think that adds depth to the story. But just um, yeah, I think that was probably the thing that I enjoyed the most. And I've said a few times, just the confidence, I'm much more relaxed now. I think
mm,
as a writer with this series, I should say, I say that now. The first couple of months, so
yeah.
I made my pitch for this series. I had my ideas, got my contract, and
Okay.
then I sat down to write it. And then the first 2 months were just chaos of me going, have I made a mistake? This is so hard. I'd forgotten how hard it can be to start a new world and try and bring all this complex stuff together,
uh,
and figuring it out, and I did have 2 months of just going, oh, this is impossible. But after that point, once everything settled down, and I had a good direction with it, yeah, I just really enjoyed writing this book generally, I think. And
mm,
obviously it was during COVID as well.
yeah.
Which is, obviously just it's a crazy time. It was a crazy
Yeah,
time
yeah, it
for
was.
everybody. And we had these, here in Victoria, I think we had the biggest lockdown in the world, in terms of
Wow.
like how many days we were literally not allowed to go out of our house.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
I can't remember how many it was, but it was a lot.
It was a lot.
And but I was in this incredibly fortunate situation as an author where, I'm working from home anyway, and I can lose myself in my work. Um, and and so um, that was a great way to escape, I guess,
Mm.
the craziness that was going on in the world. And yeah. But no, I really enjoyed writing this book
Yeah,
for sure.
I think it is reflected though in the story. I don't know whether this is because I'm just too deep into this POV, but I definitely felt that. Yeah. It's the first person narration. It's the first person narration. It really pulls you in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And one last question before we end this interview. One of
Yeah,
the things that is applied not too much in the Licanius trilogy, but it's kind of like how sci-fi it can be. Let's say
yep,
in the Licanius trilogy, there is the element of time travel, of course. There's the
yep,
element of time
yeah,
travel that is usually applied more in science fiction. So
Yeah, yeah.
in The Will of the Many, there are technologies. There are a lot of
Mm.
technologies. And I think that is so cool. That is so cool. And so I'm going to assume that you don't mind, right? Having these kind of technologies and all that, because some authors, some writers are very, very strict about not having any sci-fi stuff in their books.
Yeah, I think and look, it's that's completely their right.
Yeah, yeah.
um but to me, you gotta, I think it's about how it's kind of about logic. It's about, well, um if you've got these, if the world's at this point and you've got these abilities, then surely these things would have developed. Um and but I mean, I love sci-fi as well. Like
Hmm.
I'm a huge, like, especially I think for movies and TV and so on, I'm probably more into sci-fi than fantasy. I think in
Ah,
terms
okay.
of the stories that I enjoy. And no, I love elements of sci-fi in fantasy, and I think sci-fi has some really interesting. It tends to do really interesting, uh, not philosophical stuff, but stuff that raises interesting questions,
Hmm.
um, like time travel, and uh, there's I don't want to say too much.
Yeah, yeah, I know, I know, I know. I mean, there are things in this book that I would like to ask right now, but also I cannot.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's one of the frustrating things about talking to people, particularly who haven't read. But it's like somebody, people will go, "Oh, what makes your book unique?" And I'm like, I want to tell them this thing,
Yeah, yeah.
but so all you can really go is, well, there's a really cool thing that I can't tell you about. And yeah, but look, it's that's hopefully that's something that gets people reading anyway. So
Yeah, yeah. I think it definitely will. People just have to reach some certain stage in the book.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I think I have enough of your time today. Thank you so much, James, for visiting my channel. It means a lot. Just one final question.
Yep.
Will the release of The Will of the Many coming really soon? How many
Mm.
books do you think will be planned for the series? I know that you have mentioned this might become a trilogy, but there's also potential for it to become, I don't know, maybe even more than that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a it's a funny story. uh, so yeah, I mean, I'm contracted for three. It will
Okay.
be at least three. But one of the things that I really, really wanted to do uh when I set the title for this series, I said, I'm not going to call it, because obviously the Licanius Trilogy. I called the Licanius Trilogy from book one. Felt very much an obligation to make it a trilogy. Um,
Yeah. Okay.
and I said, no, 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 no. This time, I'm not going to put the number of books in the title. I'm just gonna call it hierarchy, and that's going to be great. And then I can make it as many books as I like. And then uh, Saga put up the Amazon page for it.
Trilogy.
Um, Immediately the hierarchy trilogy. Damn it, guys! No, it's, it's fine. They changed it. It was all good. It was all good. But yeah, it's just really funny that I worked so hard to avoid having that in the title.
Hmm.
But look, I'm yeah, like I said before, even this book, with how long potentially it could have been if I hadn't sort of rearranged things,
Yeah.
it wouldn't shock me if it's longer than a trilogy. But that the aim is for it to be as long as it should be. I don't want to
Yeah.
drag it out, but I don't want to cut things short either. So yeah,
Yeah. So I'm going to assume it might become a quartet. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that's it for today's video. Seriously, to those of you watching this, if you love James Islington's books, or if you haven't read James Islington's books, you really should do it. Especially The Will of the Many. The Will of the Many is coming really soon. It is currently my favorite book of the year. No, I'm not. I'm not hyperbolic here. That is the truth. Right now, it is still my favorite book of the year. So yeah, pick up The Will of the Many at the nearest store near you or digitally. Thank you so much, James, for coming to my channel. It means a lot to me, seriously.
Thanks so much for having me on. It's been great.
Bye bye, and good luck with the release. Yeah.
Thank you.
Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.